You are listening to WTUZ Radio Podcast. Welcome to WTUZ Radio Podcast. I am your host, Rhonda. So bringing you an early episode because we weren't able to air live last night. It just so happened to run across my feed again, and I'm like, oop, I better put this out here. This will be real quick, but I want to put this out here again so it can be in the forefront for everyone so we can start paying attention. Now, this week, Biden announced a moratorium on housing foreclosures. All right. So, as you all are aware, because of the pandemic, it started with there being a moratorium on evictions. And we're over a year with that. And so what happened, if you are a landlord, you basically could not evict your tenants if they were not paying rent. And so we all saw, well, most of us saw the news stories where the landlords were pretty much trying to collect the rent, and their tenants pretty much said they're not going to pay. Now, in some cases, absolutely, folks lost their jobs. They can't pay. Hence, it is what it is. But in some cases, folks were like, hey, why should I pay? All right. But at the end of the day, the landlord was still stuck with juggling, trying to pay their mortgage. All right. Now, I've talked about this several times. A lot I've talked about it personally because the housing market, the U.S. housing market prices are right back at the point where they were in 2008. Actually, they're a lot higher, but let me restate that. Prices are a lot higher than they were in 2008, but the bubble, so meaning the bubble, the frenzy for housing prices are right where they were at the 2008 housing crisis. So in other words, family, it will pop. That bubble will pop. And 2008, if everybody remembers, it was a worldwide financial crisis that basically crashed the world's financial system because of housing. And everything that went along with that, with bogus mortgages, and also betting on mortgages. It was a hot mess, y'all. So then that came the big bailout, yada, yada, yada. Let's be clear, big bailout for the banks because the homeowners still got foreclosed on and the banks got bailed out. The big banks got bigger because behind the scenes, they were forced to buy out the other smaller banks that were going under. Remember Scummy Countrywide and WAMU, Washington Mutual? Those big banks had to absorb those other entities, right? So basically, in an accounting standpoint, take on the banks, take on the debt, but really behind the scenes, the debt was wiped out by free money by the feds. Okay. And also because how tightly knit the economy is tied together from an industry perspective, you also had like GM had to get a bailout as well. Okay. So now fast forward that to 2020. Financially, I have called this before we had a epidemic / pandemic. I called this a couple of years before that the economy is going to crash. And for two reasons, I said it. Number one, if you pay attention to the cycles, it's cyclical. There's always at a 7-year mark. The crash starts at a 7-year mark. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean right at 7 years, bam, it's going to crash. But the decline starts at 7 years. And by the 10th year, it's pretty much a wrap. All right? Because the foundation of the way the economy, the false economy, is set up, that's the way it has to go. So we're right at that point. The difference this time, because really the economy has been over long before. You know, those of us that kind of go behind the scenes on history, and you talk about the 1933 bankruptcy, and you talk about how money isn't really money because it's not backed by anything. It's only backed by the faith of the people. And if you really want to get technical about it, really backed by the energy of the people, because there is no longer a gold standard. So meaning for every dollar, which is a debt note, it is a debt note. Every dollar currency that is printed, it is a debt. Because the Federal Reserve is loaning, quote, quote, doing that in quotation mark, that money out. Okay. Now, back in the day, prior to the 1933 and all of that, for every dollar that was printed, there needed to be something tangible with it, i.e. gold. So when you hear them talk about the term of the U.S. coming off the gold standard, that is what they are referring to. Because back then, the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury, for every dollar that was printed, there had to be an equivalent amount of gold. All right? So the 33 bankruptcy was huge because it took the dollar off of that gold standard, and then they went in and started confiscating the gold, i.e. hoarding the gold, and issuing out this massive amount of credit known as dollars. And which, from that point forward, sorry, I have to go over this, you all, but I have to go over it because some people might not know this. I promise I'm going to get to the point. The original point of this podcast. Okay, so from that point of coming off of the gold standard, you had massive amount of inflation. Inflation started kicking in more and more. Now, what really made hyperinflation is back in the 70s when, I think it was Nixon. I could be wrong which pres it was. I think it was Nixon. Tied the dollar to oil. Okay? That's where the term, hence petrodollar, comes from. Okay. And then if you kind of look at the 70s, there was oil embargoes, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's when hyperinflation started to kick in, when there was the oil shortage, yada, yada, yada. So from the point of the 70s on up, inflation keeps going up. So meaning the cost of living keeps going up. And the reason the cost of living keeps going up because the value of the dollar goes down. So as I speak, they don't want to tell you this, but it costs more to print a dollar than it's worth. So meaning the dollar is in negative territory. It truly has no intrinsic value. All right. So back in, let's say 2008, I'll give it 2008, but it was a little bit before that. China and other nations, because, let's be clear, family. These are planned world economies. So don't think for 1 second that, China's trying to take over this. Germany's trying to take over that. No. These are planned, shared economies. They may give you the guise that China's trying to take over this, that Russia's trying to take over this, and that the UK and the United States are aligned. That's the ruse. That's the puppet show. But meanwhile, the puppet masters are behind the scenes and they plan a world economy. They make a decision, okay, US, you've been a superpower for X amount of years. Now it's time to swing back to China. Okay? So, with the dollar being in negative territory, there were financial articles coming out saying that other countries did not want to settle their cargo in US dollars. All right. And I used to report on this a lot when I first started doing podcasts. I used to talk about this in a lot of detail. Okay. They were putting up such a front, and it took me a couple of years to figure out, oh, wait a minute, these MFs are in it together. But they were putting it out there that China would not settle its shipping in dollars, and the rest of the world. Everybody wanted to move from the US dollar as the preferred standard currency for settlement. It had gotten so ugly, they wanted us to feel that it was so ugly, that ships, what do you call it? The cargo ships. Y'all know what I'm trying to say, because the one that just got stuck in the canal last week, that's the ships I'm talking about, y'all. Freight ships. So forgive me, I can't think of it right now. Doggone it. So it had gotten so ugly that they wanted us to think that it had gotten so ugly. And I'll tell you why in a second. Is that they were leaving cargo out to sea because of the settlement payments. All right. And when we were reporting on it, we were telling you that you're going to start seeing prices go up even higher, and you're going to start seeing shortages. Now, the reason they were putting up that ruse And even when I was reporting on it back then, that wasn't common knowledge in the mainstream media. Only those of us that truly research and we read the back end financial journals, we knew that information. But they certainly weren't talking about it in the mainstream media. Okay, so that's what I was reporting on. Okay, but it took me years to put the total picture together to say, oh, okay, so that was just another psyops, but this is what you all are really doing. Because what they were really doing with that particular psyops was just preparing on why we're going to have a huge economic shift and why the U.S. would no longer be viewed as the world economic power. Okay, that's where they were really getting where they were really getting at. Now, I want you to think about these time frames that I'm talking about. I was talking about 2008 crash and all of that. Now, in the meantime, this is why you have to read a lot across different things, across the financial sector, entertainment, spiritual, political, because it all ties together. Now, Bitcoin, let's talk about it. Meanwhile, all of this is going on, and in the background, in the financial world, not the underground black market. Let me be clear. Let me not lie upon folks. Bitcoin. Guess when Bitcoin was introduced? 2008. So they claim, the official story of Bitcoin, they claimed and allegedly that someone anonymously built Bitcoin, a digital / electronic currencies that is independent of the financial system totally. So meaning no concept of banks, no concepts of a Federal Reserve, etc. It is an anonymous way to do transaction from peer to peer. All right. Now, Bitcoin really was used in its very, very infancy stage. Yeah, it was used by international dope men. Yeah. It was literally used heavily by international dope men and black market folks. Okay. So I heard about Bitcoin in 2012. It was in passing. And this guy told me about it. He didn't explain it. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was 25 cents back there. Yeah, 0.25 cents back then. Okay, so just a quick synopsis of Bitcoin. Bitcoin uses peer-to-peer technology to operate with no central authority or banks, managing transactions, and the issuing of Bitcoins is carried out collectively by the network. Bitcoin is open source. Its design is public. Nobody owns or controls Bitcoin, and everyone can take part. Though many of its unique properties, Bitcoin allows exciting uses that could not be discovered by any previous payment system. Okay? All right. So I got to thinking, fast forward 2018, I said, they're lying about Bitcoin. Now, this is just my lowly, humble opinion. So that wasn't developed anonymously. That was developed solely by the Alphabet Boys. Because even with that, the initial usage from a black market perspective, yeah, you had the criminals, quote, quote, using it. But I'm pretty sure that the alphabet agencies utilized it as well to fund their different COINTELPRO operations. Okay. And it fits perfectly from moving from a paper currency that has lost its value totally, and from that economic structure, which is essentially collapsed, to move to something totally different. And this can coincide with moving to artificial intelligence and machine learning, and merging machine with consciousness. Digital currency fits that perfectly. Okay? So the spiritual component to that is you had between 2008 crash. Okay, so think about it. 2008 financial crash happened worldwide. Bitcoin is introduced 2008. 2012, from a spiritual perspective, that is, according to the Mayan calendar, prediction of leaving out of the Pisces age and ushering in the Aquarian age. All right. So currency is just like the word says. It's about energy. So that whole system of the dollar currency, of that particular energy associated with that current, is no longer viable with the new energy that we have entered with the Aquarian age. Right? So that's why they had to switch as well. Okay? So I didn't even expect to go there, but it is what it is. All right. So hopefully now you're understanding why we're moving into the digital age with the currency perspective, and how it ran directly parallel with the crash of the 2008, right? And if you go back and track the price of Bitcoin, and let's just be clear, Bitcoin is not the only digital currency. Those of you that follow digital currencies in just any little semblance, you should know that. It was just the first out the gate, purposely the first out the gate. And it went from 25 cents. I knew it at 25 cents back in, I think dude told me about it in 2012. I wish the hell it would have been explained to me properly, but that's neither here nor there. I'm good. Trust me, I'm good. But as of today, Bitcoin is, just for one digital coin, $58,234. Now, how can $1 match up to that? There's no possible way $1 can match up to that. Okay? If you look across all the other digital coins, you are going to see, for the most part, their value, and I'm talking the popular ones, goes far beyond what a dollar is. And to even prove the point further, there is already, family, a U.S. digital coin. Look it up. To listen to this episode in its entirety, go to anchor.fm/WTUZ Radio. Again, that's anchor.fm/WTUZ Radio. And the link is in the description. Thank you, and peace and love.